I think the interesting thing that we heard earlier from the officials coordinator about the rule changes, continuation and challenges. What were you involved in meetings about that? That's something you wanted to implement? What was your reaction to those two rule changes?
Yeah, John Higgins does a terrific job of communicating with the coaches. There's a system for it, but he also has a personal touch. So yeah, he started communicating this in Big 12 meetings down in Orlando, which I believe was in May or early June. And then there's been consistent dialogue. You know, you run into him in the summer when he's out doing his clinics at the AU tournaments, and he's been on a couple conference calls. So the communication's been very consistent from our league, which is through John. And then we've talked to the staff about how to strategize and deal with some of these rule changes. And I think these exhibition games are the first chances to kind of work through some of those strategies.
Yeah.
And it's still a little bit of a process for us. Just like our team, the goal wasn't to be perfectly set up to deal with them now. It's to make sure we're in place to deal with them when the season starts. So we've tried a couple things, and we're going to tweak some different technology things that we're doing on the bench in the Arkansas game versus what we did in the Michigan game.
Yeah. Would you have liked the continuation rule as a player? Would you have benefited from that?
I didn't ever drive the basketball, right? So I don't think as a player it would have helped me. But listen, I think I'm one of these guys that you want to preserve the things that have made college basketball unique. But at the same time, you got to continue to modernize our game, and that's a delicate balance. So if there's ways to modernize our game but not lose the heart and soul of college basketball, I'm usually all for that. Some of these rules, the ideas of them, I feel great about. Being able to challenge calls, continuation. Some of the way that the rules are being laid out may be the issue. So like anything, the devil is in the details. So I wouldn't say that I love the rule changes, not because I don't want to evolve and change, because I don't think they make a whole lot of sense, and I actually think they make the game even more difficult for the referees.
Yeah.
The challenge rule, I don't know what the benefit of challenging a call is until the last minute or so of the game. And you're only able to challenge a handful of things that they were actually reviewing on their own anyway. In terms of goaltending and out of bounds. So I think we've actually made it more complicated. I know that's with the intention of maybe not having as many stoppages and timeouts, but at the end of the day, we have to get the game right. And I'm not for the way that we've unrolled them. I wish we could challenge, but I don't think if you get a challenge right, you shouldn't be penalized. And you get a challenge right, you get one, but you only get one more.
Yeah.
And I think there should be other things that we're capable of challenging. So I like the idea of challenging, but I don't necessarily like the way that we've unrolled it.
You had a highly rated roster last year, you're ranked 20th. You have a highly rated roster this year, they don't have you ranked. Why is this team better?
I don't get into the rankings and the feelings this time of year. I've been one of these people that always appreciates the fanfare around college basketball and the interest. But internally, whether it's personally or within our locker room and our staff meetings, it matters zero. The only thing that matters is us trying to improve our team every single day. And that's really all my time and attention goes to. So that doesn't bother me, the fanfare, people talking, and that's great for college basketball. It's great for Cincinnati basketball if we're in that conversation. But what's really important for me as the coach and for our program is that everything is just about our improvement, so we can have the best possible team when the ball goes up for real, and that team keeps improving so we can be the best possible team in league play and certainly at the end of the year.
Year 3 in the Big 12. When you think about your first year compared to now, what areas have you had to adjust the most in terms of style of play or just your overall philosophies with what you want to implement inside your program?
Yeah, I think going into the Big 12, there was there's just a mad dash and sense of urgency to have a competitive roster. You know, I mean, just to assemble a roster with that type of a change in leagues that can compete night in and night out. And certainly you want to do the next 2 or 3 or 4 steps, but in a short time frame in today's climate, you know, that's a difficult leap, and we were trying to do, I think we did a nice job of, you know, assembling a competitive roster in a really short period of time entering this league. Now that you've coached in the league for a handful of years, you start to learn the intricacies of the league. You start to see the details that go well beyond just having, you know, Big 12 level players. And so there's a ton of details that go into that. There's a ton of strategy that goes into that incorporate all aspects of the program. I think there's just a lot more clarity at this point than there ever has been.
Coach, looking back to the Michigan scrimmage, 6 guys in double figures there. What does that say about this team and the versatile players on the offensive end and the defensive end, that you can have multiple 5, 6 different guys who can put up double figures every night?
Well, again, I've said the Michigan exhibition was going to be a really important tool for the growth of our team throughout our preseason. I think there were some aspects that gave us some confidence in some of the things that we've been working on and emphasizing in the summer and the preseason. And I think there were some aspects of it that, you know, you go, man, we got to really tighten up and improve in these areas in a very short period of time. But we've had confidence that we had a lot of skill on this roster and quite a bit of depth when it comes to playmaking and scoring, and ways to do that differently, whether it's in the interior to get some easy baskets, maybe to get fouled a little bit more, we hope, and then certainly with shooting. And I think you could see elements of that in our exhibition, but we've seen elements of those things on a daily basis in practice.
Do you have an update on Jalen Haynes? I know you didn't have anything.
I don't today. Yeah, I don't today.
I feel like there were times last year in games when it was tight that when I was looking at the bench and seeing stuff, that kind of seemed like you might have been the most energetic and most like pumped up person. Did you feel like a part of this rebuilding this roster was finding guys that kind of matched the competitive nature that you wanted to have, and you wanted to bring in guys that kind of reflected you a little bit?
I think making sure that within our roster there's players that have a certain competitive spirit and competitive character that can be contagious for the entire locker room was something that we sought out for. It's not an indictment on any player that was on the team last year or wasn't on the team. It's just having some players that have a certain type of edge that's infectious, that helps everybody's edge. So when you talk about a guy like Sincere Harris, that's a massive part of us targeting him right away as we're building the roster, is that there's a guy whose competitive edge and competitive spirit is as good as anybody in college basketball, and it has an effect on the rest of the roster. So yeah, that's something that I value a lot. It's something that I believe Cincinnati values a lot. And I don't even mean just the University of Cincinnati or Cincinnati basketball. I think that's consistent with the culture of our community. You know, people in our community are hardworking people. They want to see a competitive edge and a competitive energy. I feel like I relate to that, and I feel like we have a couple guys. I think we have a roster full of guys that relate to that, but we have a couple guys that ooze it, that help bring it out of others.
This is the most international team Cincinnati's ever had. Is that something that you take pride in?
No, I mean, I certainly value international recruiting. That's been something that this is my 15th year as a head coach. I'd say for 12 or 13 of my 15 years, we've targeted the international market as a way to separate ourselves in recruiting. So that's becoming more the norm now in college basketball with NIL, but it's something that our staff, or the staffs that I've had, have been doing for a really long time. So to look up and see a roster with a lot of guys isn't surprising, but it wasn't as if we set out to say let's build an international roster. We set out to find the right players for Cincinnati basketball, and it doesn't matter where they come from. We want to find guys that fit us and that can help fill our roster out. And it just so happened that there's a number of international guys. I will say this, we have a couple guys like Jordi Rodriguez, for example, that's over here in year one. But a lot of our international players this year were already in college basketball. So they're not coming directly from a club in Europe per se.
When you look at your schedule, the league schedule scaled back from 20 to 18 games, how much of a benefit was that to add games against Louisville, Clemson, Georgia, as well as keeping the rivalry with Xavier and Dayton?
Yeah, I think that, again, back to the original question that you asked, having 2 years of experience in the league, it also gives a lot better perspective about how you approach scheduling. And so, there's obviously a very strategic approach to scheduling. I think fans out there sometimes, because why don't they play this? Well, you don't always get to choose the games, even though we are responsible, because we have to find agreements with other schools. Dates have to work. It's a incredibly difficult dynamic scheduling, but it is strategic. We wanted to make sure we had a very, very challenging non-conference slate. I think we achieved that. You want to have some balance in your scheduling. You want to be able to play at home some in your schedule. And then most importantly, you want your schedule to help prepare your team for league play and give you the best opportunity on Selection Sunday. I believe on paper we've done that with our non-conference schedule.
As a follow-up to that, do you schedule games in certain areas to help with recruiting at all?
I think there's other aspects to scheduling that can be, bonuses. But no, that's not, at this stage, that's not been like a primary focus. If it works out that way, it's a bonus and it's great. But the most important things for us, does our schedule help our team grow and prepare for conference play? And does our schedule give us the best opportunity on Selection Sunday to be where we need to be? Those are goal number 1 and 2. And there isn't a goal 3, but if there's a couple benefits to other aspects of scheduling, certainly we accept those benefits, but we don't make decisions based on it.
Coach, you mentioned Sincere's defensive mindset kind of earlier. I was listening to Kirk Carissa earlier talk about his decision to come to Cincinnati. He kind of mentioned he prided it on the defensive aspect of how you coach his team and that this team is going to defend their butts off. Does Kerr's energy kind of rub off on Sincere's, or vice versa, to kind of get this team that energy to be a defensive-minded team heading into the season?
Well, I think you talk about competitive edge. We talked about competitive edge in this interview already. And Sincere has a competitive edge. Kirk Carissa has a competitive edge. And they're different players and different personalities, but they're both alphas. They're both outward in their personalities, and that edge is important for our team. I love what Kerr says about defense, because Kerr hasn't been known as a defensive player, even though he's been known as a very competitive player. But I think I've coached against Kerr, and I think Kerr from day one in recruiting, and I talked to him some 2 years ago in recruiting when he was leaving West Virginia, he mentioned that he liked the fire and the passion that he felt from the sideline. I know that's an area that I really relate to Sincere that way. I really relate to Kerr that way. And then, like Day would be the number one example. They all have this edge. Jalen Haynes as well, that's incredible. And I think that's how I relate to them, even though they're all very different players and very different personalities. And there's others as well, in fairness, like a Keyshawn Tiller, and you could kind of keep going down the line.
You also mentioned Kerr's personality today. How cool is it to see as a coach kind of him experience this for the last go around here in Kansas City, see his outgoing personality kind of show for guys like ourselves who are taking this on as well?
Well, I don't want it to be his last go around. We got to find, and I mean this genuinely, like if you look at some of the rules and stuff, he may have another year. So let's not say that. You guys didn't know Day had another year at this point last year, but
that is true.
I have really enjoyed watching all 3 of the guys that came with us today. Just, Kerr's already out of his shell. That's how he lives. He lives out of his shell. He's wide open personality, but so it's great to see him in this environment, and he's been here before. But watching Day, thinking about where he was at Kilgore. I mean, I remember meeting with him and in Coach Hobright's office in Kilgore, Texas, on the side of the gym, and he could barely say 2 words. He was so shy. And to think that 3 years ago we were there to where he is today in this environment, and watching him get out of his shell, and watching Mustafa continue to grow up and get out of his shell, those are the rewarding things as a coach that have nothing to do with basketball.
What are the early returns on Coach Njai and how he's impacting the big men on the roster?
It's been great to have somebody that they focus on player development in the front court. And not only are they have experience there like Coach Mamadou has, but he played in the front court at a really high level. So he's got an interesting way of relating, not just because of his coaching experience, but because of his playing experience.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Coach.